We're going to be starting chapter 15. Chapter 15 is a relatively short chapter with material you've had a lot of before, so hopefully it won't take too long. Here we see a nice quote by Eleanor Roosevelt: "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." And I hope you are all still believing in the beauty of your dreams, even though you're stuck in the house some, or stuck at work. So we're going to be talking about drugs for immunization and immunomodulation. And these are found in your book, pages 279 to 291, so 12 pages, not a whole lot. ATI chapter 36. We're going to be talking about the different kinds of immunity, which you've gone over quite a bit. We're going to be talking a lot about vaccinations. And at the end, we'll be talking about immunosuppressant drugs, which a lot of people are on after they have had organ transplants and other medical issues. All right, so let's review the types of immunity. And we are going to use chickenpox as an example of a disease that you can get all 4 types of immunity covered. So the first type we have is naturally acquired active immunity. This describes a person who has had the disease, so in this case chickenpox, made antibodies to the disease, and it's assumed that those antibodies will remain for life. Now, there are a few people here and there who get chickenpox more than once. Unfortunately for them, they just ended up with not enough antibodies. And but most people won't get chickenpox again if they're exposed to it. In fact, it's in the past been good to be exposed to it because it kind of revs up those antibodies that you already have. We see people who are not getting as exposed to it anymore because we have a chickenpox vaccine. And so those antibodies don't get a chance to kind of practice on something. Unfortunately, the virus goes into the body and remains dormant, usually along nerve tracts, and it can rear up and get you again later as shingles. About 1/3 of people, when they're ill or immune compromised, will end up with shingles, but you can get a vaccine for that also. So if you have chickenpox and you never get it again, hopefully, you have naturally acquired active immunity. Active because you actively made immunities against it, and naturally acquired because you caught it in nature. Then we have artificially acquired active immunity. In this case, you still have active immunity in that your body makes antibodies against the illness, in this case, chickenpox. But it is artificially acquired. You don't get this immunity by getting the illness. Instead, you have the illness introduced to your immune system. And that's done by giving either an antigen for an illness that is killed in various ways, or you're given what's known as an attenuated vaccine, which is a live virus that is weakened to the point where it's not going to infect the vast majority of people. Now, if a very immune compromised person is exposed to a live weakened virus, theoretically the possibility is that they could get the illness from that. But if that were a real strong possibility, we'd have people getting sick right and left because of being exposed to people who've had vaccines, and that just does not happen. But in this case, chickenpox is a live, attenuated virus. The virus is grown over and over again in a certain medium, and it no longer has the ability to infect someone. But if you introduce it in a vaccine, it fools the immune system into thinking it's been exposed to varicella or chickenpox. It's going to stimulate the body to make their own antibodies, and they should have protection for quite a period of time. Boosters might be necessary. I think with varicella, you have to get 2 vaccinations in your life. One kind of early on and then one later, and possibly a booster later, but right now the vaccine seems to be holding people for the most part. Then we have two types of passive immunity. Passive immunity means you do not get the antibodies yourself. Your immune system does not formulate the antibodies. Instead, you are using antibodies from another source. And one way to acquire it is through naturally acquired passive immunity. Passive immunity, you don't make antibodies, but you're protected by somebody else's. In this case, your biological mother. Antibodies pass from mother to infant through breast milk for certain mild respiratory illnesses and GI illnesses. For vaccine preventable diseases, protection takes place over the placenta. Passive immunity from illnesses is present for a period of approximately 6 months. Once the 6-month period is up, you can't guarantee that your mother's antibodies that cross the placenta to your blood supply temporarily are still holding on, and that's why we start vaccinating babies at about 8 weeks old. But in this way, small infants are protected for a certain period of time. Unfortunately, there is a school of thought that extended breastfeeding will protect children from vaccine preventable diseases and that they won't need vaccinations. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. The antibodies do not cross through breast milk in this case for vaccine preventable diseases. And so once placental protection has expired, then the child is going to be vulnerable to these vaccine preventable diseases. The last way that you can get passive immunity is if you get an injection or an infusion of immune globulins. People who have had certain illnesses many times have a high number of immunities to a particular illness in their plasma. And when they donate plasma, they can serve as donors for people who have been exposed to these illnesses. So in this case, somebody with a very high titer for the varicella virus can donate plasma, and it will be turned into injectable immune globulins that would protect somebody who's been exposed to chickenpox and has never had it themselves. And I saw this when I worked in labor and delivery. I was working in an antepartum unit, and we had a patient who came in, and she was probably about halfway through her pregnancy, and she had 2 or 3 older children, one of whom went to nursery school, and this child came home with chickenpox, passed it on to the younger sibling, and the mother, who had never had a natural case of chickenpox, was terrified that she was going to get the illness because she was pregnant. And at certain points in the pregnancy, varicella can be very, very dangerous for a fetus. So she came in and spent a number of hours with me in the antepartum unit while we waited for the order to be sent to UT and a courier to get the vials of immune globulin and bring them over to the antepartum unit so that she could have the injections. And the reason I remember that they were injectable was because this poor lady was extremely needle phobic, and she had to get 4 injections with it was 12 milliliters total. So she had to get 4 IM injections of 3 milliliters each. So she got them in each dorsogluteal and then each vastus lateralis. And she was extremely unhappy about that. However, she was happy 4 months later or so, when she had never caught chickenpox herself and delivered a perfectly healthy baby. She was given the varicella vaccine before she left the hospital, and hopefully nobody in that family will have to worry about it anymore. But that's one example of somebody who can have their disease suppressed for a limited amount of time. So immune globulins don't give you permanent immunity to an antigen, but they will keep you from getting the disease suppression, rather than prevention for a limited amount of time.